Welcome to the School Leadership Show. I'm Mike Dowdy. This is the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders realize their potential, advance their careers, and achieve work-life balance. We bring together the greatest minds from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. This is the show we wish we had 20 years ago. This show is about you. We're here to help you become the best school leader you can be while still having a life outside of work. Today I'm talking with Dr. Jeff Cimmerer, a veteran technology director and CIO, and we explore the past, present, and future of instructional technology. We also get into the traps and mistakes that school leaders can avoid to maximize the impact of technology and data in improving teaching and learning. Enjoy this interview with Dr. Cimmerer. So I'm here with Jeff Cimmerer today, Dr. Jeff Cimmerer. Hello, Doctor.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. So today we're going to talk about technology integration, trends in technology, maybe hit on some data, but really keep the focus on what aspiring and practicing school administrators need to know about technology and maybe some pitfalls that they can avoid based on our experiences. How's that sound?
That sounds pretty helpful.
Fantastic. All right, so can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and how you ended up as a tech director / CIO?
You got it, Dr. Dowdy. So probably 17 years ago, I started off as a library media specialist in a suburban district in New York State and quickly worked my way up through the ranks as library media specialist, moving towards a tech director role. Because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, technology was just at the cusp of growing in school districts. And, for example, email was spotty, phone systems spotty, instructional technology spotty. So I seized the moment well over 14 years ago to earn my first position, coming out of a library position, to the director of technology. And I've been in that role for at least 14 years now and just transitioned into a chief information role, as now data really is the thrust of what districts are very interested given in different accountability measures.
All right, so you talked a little bit about how things were kind of spotty in the early to mid 90s. If you think about the last 15-ish years, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen over time?
Wow, there's a couple I'd want to quickly talk to, and that's adoption. When I look 15 years ago, teachers to use technology, you had your pioneers, you had people that wanted to try different instructional hardware, different instructional software.
They still talk about like 80-15-5, like 80% of the people, meh.
Yeah. I think back then in the day, I think that's very relevant. I think that you had a large bubble of people that did not want to try technology. You're only talking 15 years ago where pioneers were those 15%ers, maybe 5%ers doing it well. And the problem back then was adoption, getting people to realize the value, getting people to take the risk to try it. And you move forward 15 years in a time machine now, the fraction has completely become inverse in the sense that we have probably 85% now wanting to use technology, whether it's for productivity purposes or for teaching purposes and having kids learn from it, and the resources are so limited. That's probably getting a little ahead, but it's a total flip-flop from what it was 15 years ago.
Well, think about 15 years ago. So in 2000, So in the year 2000, you could have teachers who'd been teaching for 25 years. They started teaching in 1975.
Absolutely. And, email was foreign, so communicating on a daily basis, rudimentary things like just blatant digital communications, whether it be email, whether it be phone systems, whether it be video, that's almost laughable, was completely out of the question for someone maybe who started in the 70s, unless you had those 1%ers as pioneers.
They were pushing the TVs and VCRs around on the carts.
Mike, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was the 8-foot rickety bad caster wheel cart.
I was always worried a kid was going to get killed.
Well, they had the straps and the bungee cords and the apparatuses holding all down the audiovisual, but that is absolutely the case not too long ago. You're not far off at all.
I saw a couple of those carts like all beat up and stacked in a corner the other day.
Yeah.
Like we got to get rid of those things.
Well, back then the big push in the 70s was what? Cable TV. It was going to destroy education. It was going to help education. And you move into the 80s and you started dabbling with AOL and internet. 90s, maybe a little more mature. And then the 2000s, as you're talking about, it became a tiny bit more mainstream, but by no means mainstream with the general population.
So, in terms of some of those changes and how they've been implemented, one of the biggest barriers I feel like to change in education is culture and context in particular. And so much of that is local. They say all politics is local. I'd argue that all culture is local. Mm-hmm. How did culture, do you think, or how can it influence the adoption of technology? And then as part of that, how would you counsel administrators, building level administrators, in terms of navigating that culture to have the greatest impact for technology integration?
I think you ask a really relevant and deep question. Culture was everything then, and it's everything now relative to the use of technology in a classroom and or for just running a building or running a district. Back then it was shaping a culture to get people to try it, take some risks, maybe reach out, maybe reinvent themselves. Nowadays, the culture and the shaping of it is really to show people the value and the efficiencies that can be gained. So if you can dig into the culture and show people and model people that technology will make a difference from a teaching perspective, a learning perspective, an assessment perspective, I truly believe that once models are shown and once you can get people to watch, learn, and listen, you can make differences with this.
So, in the last 15 years, you've watched, not only in the district where you've worked, but in neighboring districts and districts in the region, you've watched building level administrators, technology directors, try all kinds of things. And, if you had to look back on it, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen building and district leaders make in terms of technology?
Well, that's a nice tie-in because I talked about risk-taking and culture shaping based on your questions, and I would say that early in the 2000s, as we were doing some of those risk analysis or risk moves with trying different technologies, hardware was really where everyone's at. Everyone wanted to try the new gadget. And I would say, Mike, Dr. Dowdy or Mike?
Mike,
okay, Mike. The one of the earliest things that we probably, looking back in the rearview mirror, should not have done was something like smart boards. We spent, as a suburban district, high achieving school district, probably in the upwards of $800,000 to $1 million worth of hardware to facilitate the implementation of smart boards
or interactive whiteboards.
Agnostic, right? It's like Kleenex, it's like tissue, it's the same thing. So yeah, and actually to your point, there were a number of different products that we used. So it wasn't just one product per se. It was the mobile type. It was absolutely two different kind of interactive hardware. So your point's well taken. And I would say that we spent a lot of money. We spent a lot of money not only in hardware but professional development and software. And I look back in the rearview mirror and move forward 10 to 15 years, never had the widespread adoption that we once thought with the interactive technology. And we bought these interactive technologies for what? For engagement. And there's really little evidence that the glowing orb, as I called it, the glowing wall, really caused students to leap out of their seats to interact with content. So really, you asked the question about investments and returns on investment. I would have liked to have seen over the 5 to 10 years of implementing interactive whiteboards more evidence of student engagement, more evidence of teachers using the interactive white surfaces to interact with content. But today, I can't say that we have widespread adoption.
Well, and it's interesting because you and I were talking before the show about, and I shared with you my feeling about it. So I spent about 10 years as an elementary school principal. And during the early years of that, I was pushing hard for those interactive whiteboards. And we talked about one of our colleagues who went in a different direction because we had some building-based autonomy. And she went in the direction of, instead of putting smartboards on the wall, doing document projectors or document cameras and then projectors mounted on the ceiling. So you had that, yes, is it like an overhead? Yes, but it's also giving you more opportunities for real-time formative assessment where you're looking at student work on the fly.
Yep. I think it's a great story, and I look back and as I look at teachers who want to use technology and aspiring school leaders who want to plan, it teaches me a lesson around the importance of piloting, the importance of doing some research or action research before you're making large, widespread adoption. Your point's well taken, Mike. We had principals that went low tech or medium tech with the projectors and the Elmos and got a lot more bang for the buck around writing instruction, maybe some math instruction. And whereas it wasn't interactive and it wasn't glowing, they really got students out of their seat thinking about actual writing, and then actually working with math, and probably got a lot more with student engagement, which was probably the goal in the beginning.
Well, and I think you hit it because it was, in all of those cases that you mentioned, it was about the content and about the curriculum. It wasn't about the technology and then shoehorning the curriculum into the new technology.
Classic rookie mistake is just to get caught up in the technology of the day and make widespread adoption without doing the research and really being patient to make sure that the technology is going to be mature and really have those returns on investment that you're hoping for.
So you kind of alluded to this, but if you think about the last 15 years, then what has been the best bang for the buck in terms of moving teaching and learning forward when it comes to technology?
Well, I think it comes in different flavors and it's constantly evolving. And this is going to be the library media specialist come out of me. I know I mentioned it earlier in the hour, but video. I think anything with video that you can use. You mentioned a little bit even with the Elmo document projectors. Anything visual, I should say. But video has always captivated me. And I think anytime you can capture an audience where visual learning takes place, I think the research shows that 80% of what we learn is through our eyes and 20% through our ears, and I'm probably just throwing some numbers out there without some
85% of statistics are made up on the spot. So I think you got it.
Yeah. So the point is, most of the learning happens to the eye, little happens to the auditory through the ears. And technology through the years, whether it be the VHS player, the DVD player, the Laserdisc player.
Oh, Laserdisc! Right? Remember those?
I do, and you get in the Blu-ray. But now it's really what it's the video on demand. It's the Netflix type technology. Any kind of video distribution unit. If you can show students and get students to interact with that video content, I think that's where the money is.
Now, I want to transition a little bit here. So, part of your role is beyond the hardware and the software, but more into now looking at using data to inform teaching and learning. So if you were going to, what are some of the trends in using data in schools right now?
That's a really good question, and the timing of this interview is so great. I had the privilege of just literally last night, interacting with some professors at a local university, a high-profile university locally here in New York. And everyone wants to know, and I mean everyone, by that I mean the ivory tower, the professors, the administrators in K-12, teachers in K-12, parents in K-12 want to know, how are we going to monitor progress of students? What are we going to do to, whether it's elementary reading, elementary math, K through 12 progress throughout, what are we going to do to progress monitor? And to monitor progress. And the quick answer is there's no homogeneous tool right now that I'm aware of, and whoever's going to invent this is going to make a million.
So there's no mothership.
We've
been talking about the mothership for 15 years. Where is the place where all this stuff lives? Some people think it's the student management system.
Mike, you're absolutely right. It's just like paper was going to go away 15 years ago. The mothership, when's it going to land? We got to land the mothership. So I would say that,
You didn't just say that out loud, did you?
I think I just did. But, honestly, if we can come up with a consistent way to track progress, whether that's numbers, and numbers don't tell us a tremendous amount. It is a tool, but if we could track student work over the course of a K-12 experience and be able to hand that, and I'm not just talking about portfolios, if you just drill down to writing, if you drill down to math, how can we show progress? So I think there's some conceptual and some content questions that need to be answered, but building that mothership, that database, Mike, quite frankly, I don't think that mothership has been built yet. I think you have various tools in the toolbox that'll measure reading, maybe writing, maybe math, instruction and the learning that comes from it. But I do not know, as a multiple-year veteran in this business, as one tool that will do it all. I don't know of it.
So I know, in one of, in my first, even my second elementary principal gig, data was a four-letter word. And especially when you're in a high-performing system and there's kind of this feeling of, hey, we're doing fine. We don't need to bother with this data. So, thinking about the culture and the context, how do you bring people along to even start to look at it?
I think if you could show models, and I know I mentioned this earlier in our podcast, that if you can show people that providing evidence, providing data, whether that's to move students along through a daily lesson, a unit plan, perhaps a course of study, if you can show teachers that the pre-assessment, the formative assessment checks along the way, and the summative assessment, that's all linked together, and you can move students through that process by creating data points to help teachers change their instruction as student needs change, I think that is money in the bank. The problem is that's a lot of work. That's a lot of differentiation. That's a lot of individualization. So when you're trying to get a teacher that's very familiar with the way they teach to one audience, and you're going to start teaching them to use data points to teach differently to multiple groups, first of all, that causes them to really take a deep breath. But if you can show them that really is going to help the good of the order and move multiple groups forward, through that modeling process, my answer would be, I think you can bring people along. Bring all people along. It's that 80-20 rule. I don't know if you'll ever bring all people along using data or using technology. That's not quite where we are as a culture yet.
What do you think are going to be the major trends around using data in the next decade or so?
So this answer is going to take a little while. So if you're in the audience, you might want to grab a bite to eat here. So or a sip of your favorite beverage, because that's a big question that requires a long answer. Hardware. I truly believe the day of one-to-one technology in school districts providing gadgets for kids, I think it's over or coming close to being over.
Now, is that just because you're in a high-performing district with low needs and everybody's got stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Although I gotta believe somehow kids find a way to find a phone. I don't know. You can be in an urban setting, a rural setting. You look at any corner, you see a kid holding a phone. Somehow they're finding the devices.
Now, they're the sneakers of yesteryear.
That's a good analogy. But, I think you bring up a valid point. We probably still need to provide devices for some kids, but the idea of providing every kid a device every year, I don't know if that's sustainable at today's prices. Moore's Law, yeah, things are going to get faster and cheaper down the road, but if you're talking the next 10 years, I don't see iPads or tablets like iPads, could be Android tablets being handed out like textbooks. I don't think we're there yet. If you're asking me for a realistic projection of the near future, it's bring your own device in most places with sustainable Wi-Fi in classrooms that's going to hold 50 to 60 concurrent users, whether it's their own device, school issued device, back to your point, Mike. I think that's the very near future. Why? Because I think providing a device for individuals and having folks bring their own, kids bring their own devices, teachers bring their own devices, really opens up not only equitable access and providing access to content and asking questions and Googling the low level on Bloom's taxonomy knowledge type things, but it's also going to allow people to bring their own MacBooks and their own PCs and their own tablets and their own iPads, whatever flavor they prefer to create. And I've been to Apple, I've been to Microsoft, I've been to HP. I'm pretty much platform agnostic, but I think if you allow people to use their own tools to create, I think that's the environment in the near future that you want. Do I believe 10 to 15 years from now that devices will be purchased off of a rack next to the gum and the nail clippers at a supermarket? Yes, I truly believe.
Well, we're there in airports now. You can buy an iPhone in the vending machine at an airport.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. In any metropolitan airport, I agree. But I think in a supermarket at a very low cost, you will be able to find these devices. That's not sci-fi. That's not Star Trek. I believe that's real. Again, if you believe in Moore's Law and things like that. Software, this has been the knock, and I've shared this with colleagues. I've shared this with developers. I've shared this with hardware developers as well. Software, we have the potential as a culture, as a learning culture, to create incredible software that can help kids learn. But I think statistics would show, and I would want the audience to back me up on this and look it up. Where does the research go with software? It goes into pornography, and that's not meant to be derogatory or funny. You have millions and millions of dollars going into media and pornography, and it goes into edutainment, not even edutainment, but more of entertainment. The movie industry, you have millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I can't quote the exact dollar amount, going into very peculiar areas of entertainment for adults and entertainments for kids, and even gaming, for example. And if we use that money and those resources to put it into software or web-based apps for kids, I couldn't even imagine what we could simulate and create for a classroom.
So do you? I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. So do you see? I mean, we are definitely trending toward more web-based applications. So is that? Do you think that's here to stay?
I do. I do, because it's going to create that easy access, the low maintenance piece. It's all the stuff that we need to use to deliver up high quality content.
What about that whole my data's in the cloud, it's not secure, all that stuff?
We're going to get to data in a second, but that's a legitimate concern about parents. And I know it's one of the top 1 to 3 things on parents' list right now is I don't want my kids' information, I don't want my information up in the cloud. And I can appreciate that in a very immature environment. We'll get to that in a minute if you don't mind. But the software piece to finish...
Sure, Jeff, your interview. Go ahead.
It is my interview, and I want to thank you for my 30 minutes. But the software piece, we as a culture, as a learning culture, as a nation, have the ability to create very complex software, to create simulation software, similar to what the military uses, to create what maybe major airlines use. And we could be doing those sort of things K through 12 in a school district, but we don't. Why? Because there's not a tremendous amount of profit in it. That's going to need to be a choice. If we want to invest in human capital versus capital, that's a choice that both schools, the country, and entrepreneurs are going to have to make. Mike, you asked the third question. Now I'm going to answer the question around web-based and data. The data piece, we have just cut and scratched the surface on the use of data. I think for years we've used some numbers to rank kids. We've used some numbers to maybe evaluate a teacher. I don't even think we've scratched the surface to really use data to inform what we do. I think of very simple elementary type things when it comes to pedagogy around maybe pre-assessments. How many times do we pre-assess a kid to not waste ourselves as teachers or to waste kids' time in a classroom? I see very low percentages in either urban, rural, or suburban setting to pre-assess kids to know where they are in their learning and to set targets and meaningful goals. Whether or not they use technology is a whole different thing, but the data to track it's important. Formative assessments, checks along the way. We've got lots of thumbs-up activities, whiteboard activities to use, but are we really capturing that daily progress anywhere meaningful in a digital repository? You ask where I think it's going. I think the entrepreneur, the philanthropist that throws money at creating some kind of a repository that helps kids measure and teachers measure and parents measure progress for their kids throughout time is really where a good investment would be. And then summative assessments. I think, with data and being able to have teachers look at the what we always call the autopsy as to what happened over the last 180 days, I think if we really start using data and making changes on that data rather than just having it, I think that's going to be the power and the use of data. But the 3 things I just mentioned, lots of it through conjecture, I will say, but I don't see us using data or technology in that way to change what we do in the classroom based on evidence.
So you'd argue that good teaching is good teaching is good teaching.
Good teaching is good teaching is good teaching, and using data to inform that teaching is critical, and I don't see enough of it.
All right, so we're going to kind of finish up here with a little 3, 2, 1. So give me first, if you would, 3 things. So you've seen a lot of administrators in your career. You've worked with a lot of administrators, different districts, all over the place. If you look around at the folks that you kind of think are, that's a good school administrator. That person's really effective and efficient. What are 3 things that stand out to you that productive and efficient administrators do?
I really like that question. In no particular order, but I'm going to give you 3 because I don't have a script.
That's good because I asked you for 3.
That's right. Very good. Not jumping on the bandwagon of the latest trend, whether it be technology or not, but be patient. In the media, the common answer would be be a risk taker. I would be careful about being a risk taker in a high stakes environment. Number one, I would say have calculated risk. If you're going to use hardware, if you're going to use software, you certainly should use data. Calculate the changes you're going to make, and as a building leader, you can model, you can promote, and you can talk about the best uses of technology. But I would hope, as a veteran of multiple years in this field, that you're going to promote technology based on evidence and based on research, and not just based on excitement. That's number one.
The glowing orb.
The glowing orb, as I refer to it. Number two is, and I think, Mike, you referred to it before, you don't have to have 100% of your folks coming along. If I'm a new aspiring administrator, having 15%, 50%, maybe, oh my gosh, 80% people are coming along with a new trend. Don't be scared to have only a small percentage to start, but know that if the model is solid and you can model it, that whether it's hardware or software, or even the use of data, that it will grow if it has meaning and value, and it'll market itself. Number three, as far as a new administrator goes, or even a veteran administrator, when it comes to data, hardware, and software, I always say this: software should drive hardware. I would not get caught in the glitz piece of any kind of new tablet, any kind of new item that I'll affix to your wall. It goes back to curriculum. Where do you want to take the kids? What do they need to learn? And my question would be, should software drive hardware, vice versa? My philosophy has always been software drives hardware, or apps drive hardware. Choose carefully the items that you're going to use, and really what should thread all of this together is the curriculum. High quality instruction should come from that curriculum, and software definitely and hardware should be the facilitator of that learning, but not the other way around.
All right, now my two things you wish you'd known when you started as a school administrator.
You don't need 100% of the folks to bring a new item along. Sometimes it just takes a handful of individuals to spark a real positive trend. Very early on in my career, it was all about getting everyone to come along, like smartboards, for example. And I kind of wish I would have known that maybe smartboards were for everyone. It was more for some people in some classrooms. So everyone doesn't have to use every tool every time. The next thing is that you can never undersell the use of data, would be my second piece. I never would have thought about this 15 to 16 years ago when I started my career, and that is the use of data to inform, the use of evidence to inform the decisions we make can never be understated. And that can come in the form of numbers, which is fine, but I would say is if you're a teacher or an aspiring administrator or a current administrator, the use of student work as a data pool is paramount.
And that's tricky, too, because I think people get caught up in the subjectiveness or the qualitativeness, if those are words, of student work. How do you get them past that?
Well, there's certainly ways to quantify it. You can certainly use rubrics and use very specific checklists to weigh student work. But, I think you can, I would argue, if I was an English teacher or teacher of ELA, or if I was a math teacher, you can absolutely observe through student work progress in those areas through snapshots in time. You asked a question around me 15, 20 years ago, more 15 years ago as an administrator. Numbers are meaningless. What is meaningful is watching students grow, watching teachers grow through their instruction, watching students grow through their work. As an administrator, as a tech director, as a CIO, putting systems together to have work shown and work being able to be measured throughout time is so important.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up that idea of time, because I think that's an important idea or lesson for folks to think about, is that you need to be in a place long enough to see change over time. If you're hopping from job to job every 2-3 years, you aren't going to see growth. You're not going to have to live with the consequences of your bad decisions.
Yeah. Right or wrong, I immediately thought of the analogy of an NFL quarterback, and if I don't have football fans in the audience, I apologize. But Quarterback in the NFL takes 3 to 5 years to develop. If you're going to adopt a new technology, if you're going to adopt a new instructional style, to think that 1 to 3 years is going to due diligence, you're probably not going to reap the benefits that you thought. So a controlled, calculated risk, and it's probably a theme you've heard me mention 2 or 3 times in today's podcast, a controlled, calculated risk taken and to your point, Mike, watching it germinate over multiple years. You have to be patient. People want immediate results. But like a quarterback in the NFL, you have to give it time to grow, whether that's a piece of hardware, a piece of software, or the use of data. But if you can be patient, and if you've calculated and if you've done your research, I truly believe as an experienced veteran administrator that it will grow.
And it is okay for you to say that you're a Buffalo Bills fan.
Yeah, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. Yeah, and a Sabres fan. That's even worse these days.
These days it's tough. Let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.
All right, so finally, one thing that the folks listening, school leaders, can do tomorrow to promote the purposeful use of technology or data?
Oh man, that's a great question for the number one. This is why you've done this before. Include stakeholders. I learned that through my doctoral process of becoming a doctor, and including stakeholders. That doesn't mean it becomes a democracy and you listen to every voice, but to solicit feedback. How about this from students? A little bit from parents, of course, but definitely from teachers and other administrators. Solicit feedback and look at the data and research with that feedback from relevant stakeholders, whether they be experts or folks that you're working with directly, students you're working with directly, teachers you're working with directly. So important when you're putting together hardware initiatives and software initiatives. I can't undersell the value of feedback from stakeholders and input from stakeholders.
And I think you're wise on that. And again, it isn't necessarily doing what everybody wants, but it's giving everyone a voice in the process, because that I think that's a huge rookie mistake, is thinking that you have all the answers.
It gives you a metric. You started today's interview and conversation around culture, and when you start soliciting feedback from stakeholders, including students, I want to mention that a couple times. You better understand your culture, and you better understand what you can implement relative to hardware and software, and you then can better understand what kind of data points you can probably present people through data dashboards or through data visualization, and it absolutely helps to move people along. But today, this audience has an opportunity to reach out to someone like us, and in this case, me as a tech director. And the answer to your question is the easiest way is through email. And that's drjpc21@gmail.com. So it's drjpc21@gmail.com.
All right, Jeff, thank you again, folks. He put it out there, so feel free to shoot him an email, and Jeff would be happy to help. And until next time.
Yeah, hey, I'm passionate about technology, and I would love to be chatting with you folks. So thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders by school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to Mike@schoolleadershipshow.com.